The girl named Michelle fuels up the car, and her attention is drawn to a suspicious truck. The girl continues her journey on the dark highway when suddenly her boyfriend calls her, hoping to make amends.
Michelle, please don't hang up. Just talk to me, okay? I can't believe you just...
She rejects the call and turns on the radio to distract herself from her sad thoughts.
More details on that. Elsewhere today, power has still not been restored to many cities on the southern seaboard in the wake of this afternoon's widespread blackout.
Suddenly, someone crashes into Michelle's car with tremendous force. As a result of the collision, the car veers off into a ditch. Later, Michelle regains consciousness in an unfamiliar basement and realizes that someone has taken care of her. However, she soon discovers that her leg is chained to the wall, and she cannot free herself. At the other end of the room, Michelle notices her belongings. She tries her best to reach them, but fails. Soon, Michelle comes up with an idea of how to reach her phone. However, she is met with disappointment. There is no network in the strange basement. Suddenly, heavy footsteps are heard behind the door. Michelle anxiously awaits the worst.
Please don't hurt me.
However, a man named Howard doesn't respond to the girl's words and only reconnects the IV drip.
I'm going to keep you alive.
Howard gives Michelle crutches. The girl tries to scare Howard and warns that her boyfriend has probably already reported her disappearance to the police. But the man assures Michelle that no one is looking for her. Howard throws to the girl the key to the handcuffs and leaves. After freeing herself, Michelle unsuccessfully tries to open the door from the inside, and soon she comes up with a new plan. However, the girl realizes that she will have to wait for Howard for a long time. Michelle sets her shirt on fire, triggering the fire alarm. Her attempt to escape fails. Howard injects Michelle with a sedative, and she blacks out. A few hours later, Michelle regains consciousness. There is a tray of food nearby, and Howard is sitting across from her. The man praises Michelle for her bravery but warns her that such incidents should not happen again. Additionally, Howard believes that the girl should be grateful to him for saving her.
You're lucky to be here at all.
Michelle pleads with Howard once again to let her go, but he claims that she has nowhere else to go now. The girl looks fearfully at Howard, and he explains that the whole world has been subjected to a powerful attack. He is not sure if it was a chemical or nuclear attack, but he knows for certain that they are safe in his bunker. Howard tells Michelle that she was involved in a car accident, and he noticed her and rescued her as he was passing by. Michelle hesitantly thanks her savior and immediately suggests that she needs to go to the hospital. An irritated Howard explains that the surface air is contaminated due to the attack, and they will have to stay in the bunker for a year or two.
Luckily, I prepared for this.
Michelle is shocked by this news and says that she needs to call her family. However, Howard disappoints the girl and claims that none of those who remained on the surface survived. Suddenly, a loud noise is heard behind the door, and Michelle realizes that there are other people in the bunker. Howard goes to find out what happened and locks Michelle in the room again. After a few hours, Michelle wakes up and finds that the door is finally open. She gets out of the room and sees numerous shelves with supplies in the corridor. Suddenly, she notices another bunker inhabitant named Emmett. His hand is injured, and he has been in the shelter for a couple of days. Michelle suggests to Emmett that they try to escape together, but he is also convinced that the outside air is contaminated. Howard notices that Michelle has already met Emmett and explains to her that he accidentally knocked over a shelf with a week's worth of food, causing the noise behind the door. Howard shows Michelle the living room, where she can read, watch movies, and simply relax. He also explains the rules of his home that need to be followed. Howard leads Michelle to the bathroom, which is located in his room and cannot be accessed without his permission. Michelle wants some privacy, but Howard doesn't trust her and is afraid to leave her alone. Returning to the living room, Michelle notices a stack of women's magazines, and Howard tells her that they belong to someone named Megan, who, unfortunately, is no longer with them. Suddenly, the lights briefly go out, and Michelle assumes that it's caused by a disturbance from a machine upstairs. Howard once again insists that it cannot be the case and decides to take her to the entrance door with a window to the outside world. A horrifying scene unfolds before Michelle's eyes. Michelle is shocked by this news and notices a truck outside the window, suddenly realizing that it was the one she saw before the accident. Michelle returns to her room, and Emmett enters. She asks him to tell her everything he knows about Howard. It turns out that Howard worked on military satellites and later bought this farm. He decided to build a bunker here and hired Emmett for that purpose.
And, poured all his money in this place, took to it like his life depended on it.
But Michelle still doesn't trust Howard. She tells Emmett that he hit her and abducted her, so she believes that the stories about the attack and contaminated air are lies. Emmett disagrees with Michelle because he personally witnessed the attack. After a mysterious flash, the entire horizon turned red, and the frightened Emmett immediately headed towards Howard. At the last moment, he managed to enter the bunker, breaking his arm in the process. Michelle doesn't give up and tells Emmett that she heard a car engine right above the room. She notices that Emmett only knows about the contaminated air from Howard's words. Suddenly, Howard appears at the door and calls them to have dinner. At the dinner table, Emmett tries to lighten the mood and engages in casual conversation about their past lives. Howard quickly becomes annoyed by the guy's jokes and demands that Emmett let him and Michelle have a peaceful dinner. Michelle notices a keychain on Howard's belt and realizes that she can easily provoke him. A plan is born. Michelle starts chatting happily with Emmett and even flirts with him, which greatly annoys Howard. After a couple of minutes, Howard can't take the tension anymore.
What exactly do you think you're doing?
The enraged Howard pulls Michelle to a corner, believing that her behavior is meant to insult him. He demands an apology from her, and at that moment, Michelle's hand is already reaching for the keychain. Michelle obediently apologizes, Howard calms down, and they return to dinner. Michelle clenches the keychain under the table and freezes due to the intense tension. A few minutes later, Howard realizes that the keys are missing. However, at the same moment, the sound of a car engine distracts him. Michelle decides to seize the moment. Michelle rushes to the door that Howard recently showed her, hoping to escape from her captor. The girl manages to unlock all 3 locks on the first door and enter the airlock before Howard catches up to her. Michelle intends to open the second door, while Howard forbids her from going outside and urges her to stop. Michelle notices a car with its headlights on outside the window and starts calling for help, hoping for rescue. But suddenly, a woman covered in horrible sores appears behind the door and pleads Michelle to let her in. Howard doesn't allow the stranger to be let in, as she is obviously infected. Michelle hesitates and doesn't know what to do, as it seems Howard was right about the terrible consequences of the attack. The woman continues to demand to be let in, and suddenly she becomes insanely furious, insulting Michelle and banging her head against the glass, resulting in her injuring herself. Michelle is very frightened by the woman's behavior and backs away from the entrance door. Michelle returns to her room. After a while, Howard comes in and unexpectedly confesses that it was him who crashed into Michelle and caused the accident. The man explains that upon learning about the attack, he hurriedly raced down the road to reach the shelter as quickly as possible and couldn't avoid Michelle's car. Howard apologizes to the bewildered girl. Soon after, Howard suggests that Michelle take a shower and hands her Megan's clothes. Howard believes that even a small amount of contaminated air can be dangerous, so precautionary measures are necessary. When Michelle exits the shower, Howard tells her that the car outside belongs to his neighbor named Leslie. Like Emmett, she knew about the bunker and immediately headed towards Howard. Later, Howard asks Michelle to stitch up his wound caused by the bottle. Michelle hesitates, but Howard explains how to do it, and the girl manages to accomplish the task. Howard gives Michelle a box with her belongings that he managed to retrieve from her car. Michelle takes her sketchbook and mentions that she wanted to become a designer. Finally, Howard decides to tell Michelle more about Megan and shows her a photo of her. Megan's mother, after a falling out with Howard, turned her against her father and took her to Chicago. Now Howard believes that they most likely didn't survive the attack's aftermath.
Anyway, at least I tried to help them.
Michelle returns to her room once again. She is still troubled about the unfortunate woman outside. Emmett, who is behind the wall, tries to convince Michelle that there was nothing she could have done to help her, so she shouldn't blame herself. Emmett and Michelle share with each other things about their past that they still regret.
We're alive, and that means something.
Over the next few days, Howard, Michelle, and Emmett have a great time together. They watch movies, play board games, and solve puzzles. Suddenly, the walls in the living room start shaking, and the sounds of helicopters can be heard from outside. Michelle and Emmett become alarmed and want to know what's happening. Howard claims that it's surely the enemy army conducting a cleanup, eliminating the last survivors. Soon, an alarm goes off, indicating a malfunction in the air filtration system.
That's bad.
Michelle is forced to crawl through a narrow ventilation shaft to start the pump. She struggles to reach the utility room and turns on the pump. Suddenly, she notices a staircase leading to an outside hatch. On the window, she finds a scratched message saying help, and soon after, she finds a familiar earring. The frightened Michelle realizes that Howard lied about Megan. Alone with Emmett, Michelle shows him the suspicious findings. She takes out a photo of Megan from a book, where she is wearing the same earrings. However, Emmett claims that the person in the photo is not Megan but a local girl named Brittany who went missing 2 years ago. Unexpectedly, another photo falls out of the book, showing Howard together with Brittany. The girl in the photo is wearing the same t-shirt that Howard gave to Michelle. With horror, Emmett and Michelle realize that Howard abducted and killed the unfortunate girl. Emmett suggests tying up Howard, taking his gun, and forcing him to confess what he did to Brittany. But Michelle reminds him that there is no one else alive besides them to whom Howard can confess. Howard interrupts their conversation and offers Michelle to take a shower after her contact with the filtration system. In the bathroom, Michelle notices the shower curtain and gets an idea. She shows Emmett her drawing in the magazine and assures him that she can make a protective suit from the available materials. One evening, during a board game, Emmett starts getting nervous and behaving strangely, raising suspicion from Howard. Later, Michelle continues working on the protective suit. Suddenly, she hears Howard's footsteps and barely manages to hide all the materials before he appears. Howard calls Michelle to the kitchen, where he shows her and Emmett a barrel of hydrochloric acid that the three of them have to move to the bathroom. Howard explains that the acid decomposes most biomaterials and dissolves humans to the bones. Emmett and Michelle are terrified, and Emmett decides to ask Howard why he's showing them this. Howard takes out the found scissors, knives, and other items and demands an explanation. He lowers the belongings into the acid and angrily threatens to do the same to Emmett and Michelle if they don't tell him the truth. Emmett hopes that a confession will calm Howard down and takes the blame. He tells Howard that he wanted to take his weapons using those items, so that Michelle would respect him as she does Howard. Emmett admits that he was wrong and apologizes.
I accept your apology.
Michelle is horrified by what she has seen, but Howard embraces her and reassures her that Emmett wanted to harm them, and now everything will be fine. Howard sends Michelle back to her room and proceeds to dispose of Emmett's body. Michelle tries to cope with the shock and examines Emmett's ID in his wallet. Suddenly, Howard approaches Michelle in a cheerful mood and suggests eating ice cream before dinner. He is confident that now that no one is bothering them, they can be a happy family of two. Michelle finishes working on the protective suit and hears Howard's footsteps. She hides the suit under the mattress and places the homemade gas mask in the ventilation system. Howard calls Michelle to have dinner and is about to leave the room when a screw falls from the ventilation grate. Howard checks the ventilation and asks why the screws are loose. Suddenly, he notices a part of the suit under the mattress, and anger takes hold of him. While Howard lifts the mattress, Michelle runs out of the room and locks him inside. Michelle searches Howard's room and finds a canister of coolant. Suddenly, Howard appears at the doorway. Michelle pushes the open barrel of acid onto Howard, and he falls, screaming in excruciating pain. Michelle jumps over Howard and runs to her room to retrieve the suit. The injured Howard bars her way, but Michelle topples a shelf with food onto him and climbs over it. Meanwhile, due to the acid, the living room catches fire, and reaching the bunker's exit becomes impossible. Michelle decides to climb into the ventilation shaft and make her way to the room with the outside hatch. Howard regains consciousness and, hearing noise above, starts stabbing the ventilation with a knife. He grabs Michelle's ankle, begging her to stay with him, but she manages to free herself. Michelle finally reaches the utility room, where she puts on the suit, carefully sealing all the seams. She ascends to the hatch, freezes the padlock with the coolant, and shatters it with the canister. Finally, Michelle escapes from the bunker and surveys her surroundings. She notices Howard's truck and gets inside, but accidentally tears her suit. Michelle quickly patches the hole with adhesive tape, fearing contact with the contaminated air. However, she soon spots a flock of birds in the sky. Michelle realizes that there is no danger and removes the gas mask. Michelle hears the distant sound of a helicopter and climbs onto the truck, trying to get a better view. Meanwhile, the bunker explodes. The powerful blast and the column of fire attract the helicopter, and it rapidly approaches the bunker. However, Michelle soon realizes that it is an alien spacecraft.
Come on.
Couldn't find the keys to the truck, so she runs to Leslie's car, but the alarm goes off. Frightened, she hides in a shed where she finds Leslie's body. Michelle peeks outside and sees an alien monster emerging from the field. She quickly searches the body for the keys. Suddenly, the creature looks towards the shed but doesn't notice Michelle. She disables the alarm, leaves from the shed, and runs to a nearby house for help. However, the alien ship rises behind the house and releases a green gas. Michelle quickly returns for the gas mask, while the gas triggers another explosion. Michelle hurries to get into the truck but fails to close the door. The horrifying creature attacks Michelle and tears off her gas mask. Then the alien ship starts lifting the truck into the air. Michelle spots the huge monster in front of her and gets an idea. She grabs a bottle of alcohol found in the car and creates a Molotov cocktail. When the creature opens its mouth, Michelle throws the bottle at it. The explosion forces the monster to release the truck, and Michelle falls to the ground. Regaining consciousness, Michelle notices that the alien ship has crashed and fallen into the field. She exits the wrecked truck and gets into Leslie's car, which, luckily, is still functional. As she drives onto the highway, Michelle hits a mailbox with the address Cloverfield Lane 10. Soon, the radio picks up a broadcast stating that all survivors must head to Baton Rouge. However, individuals with medical or combat experience are urged to go to Houston, where people need assistance. Michelle finds herself at a crossroads between Baton Rouge and Houston. For a moment, she contemplates which path to choose but ultimately decides to go to Houston to help the survivors. What do you think awaits the survivors after the alien attack? Or perhaps, should Michelle have stayed in the bunker? Share your thoughts in the comments, give us a like, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.